national football team.
This is News Talk.
Just to follow on from the conversation we were having there before the break, so it seems that it's Nagelsmann versus Luis Enrique for the Chelsea job, but they're looking at Frank Lampard on interim basis. May well be in the dugout this Saturday. There's no keeping a good man down. Tim Vickery, hello.
Been a long time, Joe Molloy. How have you been keeping?
Very
right?
well. Has been a long time. Maybe since World Cup, perhaps.
Perhaps, or the death of Pele. I had that run, in my life from the elections over here, the end of October, build up to the World Cup, which was the end of the Messi arc, if you like, and then the death of Pele. And it's hard to think of anything in football that could be bigger than that. And then we had our riots, the January the 8th riots, the far right going berserk. And it just felt huge story on top of huge story on top of huge story. It was a kind of no sleep till bedtime months. But I don't think I'll ever have things as big as that ever again. I've probably peaked, Joe Molloy. I'm on the downward slope now.
You and me both. And has the general temperature in Brazil post January 8th cooled to something approaching normality? Well,
Bolsonaro is, as I speak, giving evidence to the federal police about a possible embezzlement corruption case. He arrived back in the country last week. He remains a polarising figure. Horrific news today from the south of Brazil. A madman with a machete in a creche, killing 4 children.
Oh my God.
And that could have been far, far worse. And I don't have all the details on that. I think he was 25 years old. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's a far right thing from that as well. And I may be stretching here, but Blumenau, Santa Catarina, the southern state, it is where some of these far right ideas have deepest roots. And there is amongst the far right a kind of anti-school thing. You know what I mean? Anti-school and it's these lefty teachers filling them with nonsense and they should be homeschooled. I don't know how much, if anything, that has to do with the lunacy of today. But the country has huge problems and huge possibilities. But the problems, I think, are bigger, and the problems transcend far right or anything else. So the big problem is, how on earth can you include the urban masses, millions and millions? How can you include them in some kind of modern economy? And Brazilian agro-business does very well, but it's an export industry that neither feeds the country nor creates a lot of great jobs. So that can't be the solution, although politically it's very powerful. And a lot of agro-business was Bolsonaro's chief backer. So that's a problem. And also, as you've seen, no doubt in Ireland, but around the rest of the world, you're trapped in that thing where the rents keep going up and wages don't. And it's just it's a calamity. It's a train wreck, because a few years ago, you always see homeless people. There are some people for whom reality, they can't hack it. It's difficult. Now you're seeing homeless families, and it's got nothing to do with drugs or personal problems. It's just they can't pay the rent. And they are powerful forces that need to be stopped in our societies. Rentier capitalism. It's almost feudalism of how much can we extract, because while you're in a world when rents keep going up, property keeps going up, and wages stay the same, you are in a situation where more and more and more people are going to be made homeless. And somewhere like here, where you've got so many in precarious situation anyway, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
It's so interesting you say that. I don't know how closely you do follow the news here in Ireland. I wouldn't think overly closely, because why would you? But the housing crisis, as it's commonly referred to, is the big story of the last number of years, and only increasingly so. And just this week, and it's been brewing and much debated for several weeks now, there was an end to a ban on a moratorium on evictions, a ban on evictions. For constitutional reasons, the government argued it had to be lifted. And so there is great anticipation of a jump in numbers of homeless people. And as you well say, it's not down to drugs or an inability to function at a reasonable level. It is purely down to rising costs and wages not matching, and shortages for all sorts of reasons. And it's very grim. It's interesting that parallel's running in Brazil.
Yeah, and it can't go on. But onwards and upwards. Onwards we go.
I don't really know how to segue in any way neatly from that to matters which really aren't important, so I'm just going to do it clunkily. The reason
the way to do it, Joe, I think, is that we are going from the truly important things to the most important of the least important things.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
Beautifully done. The Carlo Ancelotti links with the Brazilian job. So Ancelotti, 63 years of age now, he has publicly stated Brazil interested in hiring him, and he's interested in the gig. So he has stated his immediate focus is on Real Madrid, where he does have a contract until 2024. You say but?
Yeah, but that's it. He says, I'm going to respect my contract, which is till 2024. Now, Brazil are in a rush. World Cup qualification starts in September. So they need someone soon. Are Chelsea going to do them a favour? Because I was doing TV yesterday with a journo based in Madrid, and he says the only way that Ancelotti will definitely be there next year is if he wins the Champions League again, which is a possibility. You know, they're up against Chelsea and they're flying against Barcelona as we speak.
3-0.
The league looks beyond them, but the Champions League remains a possibility. If he wins that, well, maybe he stays. And he says he wants to stay until 2024. So we don't know what's going to happen with this.
He doesn't have some Jurgen Klopp-esque philosophical inclination to see out all contracts. I mean, Everton fans will promptly text in to say he dropped us like a hot potato. He couldn't get out of here soon enough. He travelled as quickly as he could, and has never thought of Liverpool again. So let's see what Ancelotti does. He'll suit himself, I'm sure. I'm curious as to the reaction in Brazil. Who was the last foreign manager to?
I've never had one.
Never.
This is for kind of one-off game, against the club side, but never. So really, never had one. The fella who was gonna coach '58, which was the first World Cup they won, it was the candidate of João Havelange, who was making his name at the time as the head of Brazil's FA. He wanted to put in a very successful local coach who was Paraguayan. That didn't happen. And after they won in '58, then the idea of having a foreign coach just became anathema. What we want one of them for? Yeah. We're world champions. So it's a historic moment. There is not one single strong Brazilian candidate. Now that tells you about a crisis in Brazilian coaching. There's no prejudice in Europe towards South American coaches. Lots of Argentines. Pellegrini from Chile, for crying out loud, has done some of the biggest clubs in the world. But Brazilians can't get in there. When they've got in there, they've done badly. The only Brazilian coach in kind of the group stage of the Champions League in recent years was Silvinho, who, very good assistant, probably not. We'll see if he becomes a top-level coach. But that didn't last very long. And they're also losing space at home. Around half the coaches in Brazil's first division now are foreign, with a lot of Portuguese. And the outstanding work is all being done in Brazil by foreign coaches. So there is no strong Brazilian candidate. Ancelotti fits the bill because it's a tough ask. Who accepts this? The players. The players don't have the least problem with this. They're globalized.
Yeah.
They already work under, in the case of Vinicius and Rodrigo and until recently Casemiro, they've already worked with foreign coaches. It's no problem for them. Younger generation have grown up with a globalized, they're playing FIFA manager or whatever. The older generation, and especially the coaching fraternity, just despise the idea. And you are walking into a trap, and they will be desperate for you to fail. It needs a diplomat. And Ancelotti is a great diplomat.
Yeah.
And he's so wonderfully laid back. Look at how the job has aged the likes of Guardiola and Mourinho. Ancelotti doesn't age at all. He's just there with his cigar and, that low-profile, consensual style of leadership is one. Some would argue that Brazil needs something more radical. That is one possible argument. But just to slip in there and not create conflict, Ancelotti is perfect in that one. But is he free? And if he isn't, can you attract? And Brazil is one of those few places where the leading Brazilian coaches, they want the national team. Whereas elsewhere, the national team has become either veterans or rookies. Now, look at England. Roy Hodgson, that kind of one of into his career, and Gareth Southgate towards the other. And that's kind of the way it's been, because the big coaches, they want to be in the Champions League. But for Brazil, it's still seen as the best, the biggest thing that you can possibly do as a coach. It's a hugely important national symbol. So I don't envy, however much they're going to get paid, if it's Ancelotti or whoever it is, I don't envy them, because they're going to be sitting in a little bit of a coconut shy, I think.
Some of the former players have voiced opposition. Rivaldo, it shows a lack of respect to Brazilian coaches to consider hiring
far-right nationalist.
Is he? God.
Yeah, very, very much a far-right nationalist. And he waited until Germany had been eliminated from the World Cup in the group phase 5 years ago now in Russia, and he said, "Oh yeah, these are the people that we're supposed to be copying, imitating." Okay. Didn't say anything after the 7-1, so
Okay.
I take what he says with a pinch of the old proverbials.
Because he did conclude by saying the team has to be managed by someone who has Brazilian blood running through their veins, which was suitably. Cafu said, "Are you going to jump in again here and destroy Cafu on me as well?"
Okay. No, not at all. No.
He said, "Why not give a chance to a young Brazilian coach? We have 4 years to form a team. Give the squad to a young coach. Give him the tranquility, and I'm sure Brazil will put together a great team." He didn't care to name names, which maybe illustrates your point that there isn't a standout candidate.
Yeah, I mean, there's one, Fernando Diniz, who's not that young anymore, but he's interesting. He's very of Fluminense at the moment. He's a standout, and he's failed in a lot of places. But because it's attractive what he serves up, he gets other chances, which is rare in coaching. And he's done very, very well with Fluminense. They're kind of anarchic. They're fun to watch. It's possession based, but it's without the set positions, if you like, of a kind of Guardiola. It's much more anarchic than that, which means that they can see goals, but it's fun. And they've just signed Marcelo of Real Madrid for so many years. He hasn't made his debut yet, but quite how he's going to fit into the mix, I don't really know. It's hard to see him as a left back in such an anarchic side. So he would be one very interesting candidate. And, well, Scaloni did all right for Argentina, didn't he? Yeah. He was a man with no previous senior coaching experience, although Scaloni did have 15 years experience of top-level dressing room football in Europe. And it's really striking, actually, how many... if you look at, say, our Champions League, the Libertadores has just kicked off.
Yes.
Look at the coaches of the Argentine sides. River Plate, De Michelis, once of Bayern and Man City. Boca have just sacked, but until last week it was Hugo Ibarra of Monaco and Porto. Racing is Fernando Gago, only recently retired, played for Real and Roma. Argentina's junior sits Gabriel Milito, who played Barcelona and Zaragoza and so on. You don't quite see that from the big names in Brazilian football. It's like the Argentines, I think they're doing their badges earlier while they're still playing. You don't see that many. Part of the reason for that is it's such a hard position in Brazilian football. It's difficult to be a coach in Brazil. That's one of the reasons there's this crisis in coaching. The calendar is the size of the country. It's a huge country, so there's a lot of travelling. There's too many games. There's no time on a training field, and you're not allowed to lose. That little mix has made for cautious coaches. South Africa a few years ago, they went down the Brazilian road when they hosted the World Cup. They ain't doing that no more. They ended up because they had this image of the Brazilian coach being lyrical, and that's not what they got at all. They got organised and pragmatic. But in order to survive in Brazil as a coach, that's what most of them have done.
In some respects, you can really see Ancelotti working. He will go in, as you said, he won't take criticism personally. He will charm everyone. He'll raise an eyebrow. He'll take the mania of Brazil and their national football team on his shoulders, and I mean, he's done an extraordinary job with Real Madrid again in many ways. So it kind of all makes sense. He's at a nice age for it. On the Copa Libertadores, the South American version of the Champions League, I was reading your piece as it gets underway now, and I suppose if people wanted a headline theme, it's your point that the last 3 finals have been all Brazilian affairs. There is a level of Brazilian dominance here, and the best that Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, Venezuela, you name it, can muster, isn't really competing with what Brazil are throwing out there.
No, the big Brazilian clubs have much more money, and they're going to have more money still. That's the way things are going here. They've also got much cuter in scouting the rest of South America. So they're cherry picking from the rest of South America. So the big Brazilians can bring back South Americans from Europe, veterans, even like Arturo Vidal from Chile and Luis Suarez from Uruguay. They can bring them back. They can bring back players who've gone to Europe and haven't come off, mid-20s players who are still very, very good players. And they can cherry pick from the rest of South America. And there's another factor in there, which has been the rise of Major League Soccer. Because Major League Soccer is reluctant to buy big-name Brazilians because you have to pay so much more for them. But cherry picks from a lot of the rest of the continent. So what we're seeing is the Brazilian clubs get stronger and the competition get weaker. River Plate have... I talk far too much. And in the end, it wins out over the vocal cords.
You're okay. Tim Vickery, listeners, having a drink of water, a well-earned drink of water.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Nothing stronger. And so it's hard to see how the rest of the continent can compete. River Plate have tried to compete now by extending their stadium. They have the biggest stadium in South America now. They took out the running track. There's a plan for Boca to do something similar and go even bigger. So that's one way of competing. Get more revenue in from having more fans packed in. But apart from that, I'm quite pessimistic about the future of the Libertadores. And one possible salvation is Pan American. It's putting the big teams from the States and Mexico in the mix. This starts timidly next year with a tournament for the 2 finalists of the Libertadores and the 2 finalists from the CONCACAF Champions League. The logistics here are horrific. The Americas are absolutely huge, and the distance between Buenos Aires and Mexico City is further than that between London and a number of cities in India. And you think about going beyond that up to Seattle or something. You know, these are Vancouver. These are massive journeys. So I think initially it has to be done on a tournament basis. But that looks to me potentially interesting because the synergies are obvious. South American football has so much credibility. Major League Soccer, it doesn't have credibility, but it does have a kind of momentum behind it. So you put it together, and I wonder in the future if there's just a possibility of a kind of alternate pole to the dominance of European club football.
Before you go, I wanted to get your perspective on Manchester United and Brazil's Antony. So he pitched up for €95 million, not cheap, and he scored early on against Arsenal and did a prolonged dance in front of the camera, and everybody thought, ooh, right man, right stage, this could be very interesting. And since then, I don't know how many Manchester United games you've managed to see, Tim, but there's been a real flattering to deceive element to his performances. He doesn't look to have searing pace to go by players at Premier League level. He likes to cut in on his left foot. He will score 1 in 20 of those shots, and he scored 3 Premier League goals. In fairness, he scored a few in Europe, but 3 Premier League goals, no assists, and he has 16 caps for Brazil with 2 goals. For the €95 million, and I appreciate he's only 23 and he's pitched up in a new country and in a new team, so you have to be fair to him. But even talking to Pat Nevin the other evening, who's regularly on with us on a Monday, jury's out and like nearing conclusion that this looks ominous.
I feel a bit sorry for him with the fee, because the thing that dictated that was the amount that they played. United paid for Lisandro Martinez, the Argentine centre-back. They paid so much for him that they were going to have to pay more for a younger striker. Now, Ten Hag knows exactly what he's getting, and Ten Hag is very loyal to this player, perhaps over loyal. when he played here, he played for Sao Paulo. He used to drive me mad because left-footed right winger, he would slow down every counter-attack.
Yeah.
Because he would always do the same thing. Stop, cut in, give the defence time to get organised. Drove me mad. Just before the pandemic, we had the Olympic qualifiers over here. It's a big deal, the under-23 championship. And the coach loved him and kept on picking him. And it just wasn't working, and it drove me berserk. And in the end, Brazil's senior coaching staff stepped in. It was a vital game. They had to beat Argentina. And they said, have you thought about dropping him? And they ended up dropping him for the vital game against Argentina, and it worked much better without him. Following that, he goes to Ajax, which is a good place to go, I think, if you're a winger. It's a good finishing school. And talking to the coaching staff who took just before the World Cup, who took Brazil to the World Cup, they were absolutely enchanted with him, and absolutely enchanted with what Ten Hag had done with him. That Ten Hag had really, really developed him. That he could his right foot was now, because that's one of the things you need. Ajax, you expect two-footed players. His right foot improved. He could go outside. He was much better at picking his options, and he would work back defensively and do much more. So I think he was like, Ten Hag could look at him and think, look at my boy. Look at my boy. Look what I've done with him. May mean that he's over loyal to him. What I like about him, I think there's a big personality there.
There is, yeah.
You saw that with a little dance. Okay. I'd rather have an excess of personality than the opposite.
Yeah.
Especially at that age. It is very interesting, the criticism. I think it was Rio Ferdinand, who called him a YouTube player. No, he's full of little tricks that don't really serve for anything. I'm now looking at Ten Hag, and I'm thinking, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do with him? You've brought him a long way. You obviously have huge faith in him. What are you going to do now? And this will be a vitally important piece of man management, I think, for Ten Hag, who obviously believes massively in him. And United, you need wingers to work there at United. That's so much part of the DNA of the club. It's such an important role. So this is a big one for Ten Hag. I would like to believe in him. I am a little bit worried about the difficulties he's having getting past players.
Yeah, he doesn't have the pace to get by players at Premier League level.
That may be long season. That's possible. World Cup season and all the rest of it. That's possible. Give him a little break in a close season, and let's see how he comes back. But if it is ruled, it's too early yet. But if it is ruled a failure, it's an expensive one. Yeah. And Ten Hag knew exactly what he was getting. Oh,
it's a lot of the. In fairness, ample credit Ten Hag is at the moment, but it's a lot of it spent. It's a big one to get wrong. Martinez is working out very well, and people were far more worried about Martinez when he first arrived. Yes. So there is benefit of the doubt quality, I'm sure, on both fronts, Ten Hag and Antony. So we'll see. Look, he's still only 23, but that's interesting, your perspective, because that frustration, I think there are still so many elements of his game, finishing school at Ajax aside, which are frustrating, I think, to Manchester United fans. He makes decisions where you think, we all knew you were going to do that, and you did it, and it didn't work. And he seems to have stopped tracking back. I mean, maybe he was doing that for a time at Ajax, but I mean, at Anfield, he was like, oh, okay, if Bruno's not tracking back, I won't either. So we shall see. Good to catch up.
It was my pleasure. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim Vickery with us live on the line. So where are we? Carlo Ancelotti, who we were just discussing, 4-0 Real Madrid winning at the Nou Camp. That kind of makes it famous night territory for Carlo and Real Madrid, which means they are 4-1 up in the semi-final of the Copa del Rey semi-final. So they're going through with 5 minutes to go. Meanwhile, in the Premier League, I'm waiting now to refresh this and see that Antony has scored a hat-trick. He hasn't. It's still 1-0. Marcus Rashford's goal in the 27th minute has Manchester United 1-0 up against Brentford. Meanwhile, Newcastle also winning, and in more comprehensive fashion, it must be said, away from home, away to West Ham, they are 4-1 up. Callum Wilson with 2 goals. And Joe Linton scored the second, just waiting on confirmation as to who got their fourth. But regardless, Newcastle 4, West Ham 1 is where we